Hey, everybody. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Matt, and welcome back to the series called People Know Nothing. This is round two of the questions. Part one was about Christmas, and is everybody recovered from their depression, about how they realized they knew absolutely nothing about something they participated in every single December of their lives, knew nothing about the pagan tradition or rituals. Did it just plague you in your bed, thinking over and over again with sleepless nights? Why isn't it, or how is it possible the news or anybody on TV never told you the things that I told you in the last video? Well, I'm going to send you even further into depression because we have something here that's almost as big as Christmas. And once again, continuing with the theme of this series, I will demonstrate you know nothing about it, or at least 99 point whatever percent of the population does, which should lend one to think, what is going on? Here we go. The question is, what is the Statue of Liberty? Trust me, you don't know. Almost nobody knows. When you ask about the Statue of Liberty, everybody gives the same canned response. Picture that scene in the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield and Professor Turgison asked about Vietnam, and that young, confident girl gives her response. Most people give something like this. Oh, the Statue of Liberty? It was a gift from France, and she represents the value of freedom that America holds, especially in attracting immigrants from around the world fleeing prosecution. She gives that answer all proud of herself. And then Professor Turgison says, is she right? Yeah, that's what the common perception is. But as we will learn in this series, the common perception of the man on the street is 179 degrees wrong every single time. What comes from the mainstream in terms of the big things in our lives or the things that we believe we know is always wrong. Now, if you ask someone on the street, the really smart human may be able even to tell us something from a textbook about how the statue's construction was inspired by the end of slavery. About 1 person in 100 will tie that topic to the chains around her feet. Well, that would get you an A in 9th grade history class. What people know about the Statue of Liberty is entirely false, and I'll prove it to you. Was she right? Well, let's get you involved in the discussion here, Mr. Helper. The Statue of Liberty was not a gift from France. The Statue of Liberty was constructed by French Freemasons, who first intended it to stand in Egypt's Port of Said. Let me repeat that. Its first intention was the statue was to stand in Egypt's Port of Said, celebrating the Suez Canal. When the Egyptians refused it because it meant having to pay millions of dollars to construct its base, America was looked at as the second choice. Let that sink in for a moment. America was the second choice? The contingency plan for the Statue of Liberty? What? Not much different than a backup prom date for a horny senior whose original date says she's saving herself. The first choice was a military dictatorship. Well, doesn't that mean then there was no intention of her ever representing freedom? Well, if you're thinking, how come I never heard that one before? Well, you get an A. That's the point of this entire series. The millions of dollars needed to build the base was, in fact, raised in America. The story about a special gift from France, it was a gift from France. No, it was not a gift from France, and it was not a gift from the French government to Americans to serve as a beacon of freedom. This is a fairy tale. The French government had nothing to do with the Statue of Liberty. A few sections from now, we'll talk about a face only a mother could love. If that thing kind of winked at you through your Match.com app, you'd say to your roommate, hey man, I thought you said this was a woman winking at me through my Match.com app. It looks like an Olympic shot putter. A face only a mother could love. The sculptor, unable to create a woman's face. That's coming up. But for now, let's return to the first thing people will say when regurgitating the Statue of Liberty script, which I remind you is, it was a gift from France. What is a gift? When your grandmother gave you a $20 sweater on your birthday, did she immediately ask for $8 back before she handed it over? Much of the funds had to be raised in America. That ain't no gift. We've all been led to believe it was a gift from one government to another. The construction was private, organized by Freemasons. You know, on TV, when they offer a free gift, just pay $40 shipping and handling, and this is yours. It ain't a free gift if the shipping and handling's $40. That's what they pulled here on the American people. Poor saps were conned into contributing towards the building and the, quote, erection of this. The millions of times teachers in this country told their fourth grade class it was a gift from France, they were all wrong. Forget about the construction and funding, though, for now. Wait till you see what the big green goblin actually represents. So what is that massive giant in flowing Roman robes, raising a likely hairy but deodorant-free armpit to the world? What is it? What is that thing looking out beyond New York City? You can tap somebody on the street and ask him, and they say, "What are you talking about? Kemosabe? That's Lady Liberty," without even realizing how ignorant that answer is. I'd say back, well, who the hell's Lady Liberty? What the hell's that? We call it the Statue of Liberty. But there's a reason. I'm telling you, there's a reason she has no real name. Even Batman has a real name, Bruce Wayne. Quote, end quote, Lady Liberty means nothing on its own. It's just some made-up lady then? Just no mythological roots, no history, just some made-up lady to represent freedom and liberty. Does that make any sense to you? Think about it. Name one statue of a person or something that appears to be a man or a woman anywhere that's just nothing in particular. I mean, there's no name. You know, imagine looking down at a statue of a guy trying to roll a stone up a hill and just say, well, who is that? It's nobody. It's just a guy rolling a stone. What? No, it's Sisyphus. It has a whole history behind it. I assure you the Statue of Liberty has a history behind it, but it's called a cult. A cult means hidden. Lady Liberty, for the idiot on the street, is the story for the profane. Imagine a park ranger conducting a tour around Valley Forge Park. As they approach a giant bronze statue of a general on a horse, and the horse has one leg raised up on a cement pedestal, a kid in a crowd comes forward and asks, "Who's that, sir?" "Oh, son, it's no one in particular." "Well, what's his name, then?" "He ain't got no name, son. I just said is no one in particular. He just represents a military man of no particular rank or era." So this, quote, Lady Liberty is no one in particular then? Just an ugly woman with a Roman nose and a man's face meant to symbolize opportunity? You can see that makes no sense. As with most things in this world, just a few rounds of critical questioning immediately exposes the bullcrap society has been feeding us our entire lives. Let's go on to the next question about Lady Liberty. Approach this guy on the street. "Oh, excuse me, sir. Let me sifting through the guys. 6 feet apart. I know, 6 feet apart. Sir, can I ask you an important question about the Statue of Liberty?"
Well, allow me to remove my mask. 1 moment, please. Step back, sir. 6 feet.
Sorry. It's an important question. Okay, please. The Statue of Liberty. You know of it.
Of course.
What's she wearing on her head?
Well, a crown, of course. Perhaps some sort of lady's tiara, like Ravenclaw's lost item.
Ah, most people would say that. Most people would say she wears a crown. That, once again, is entirely false. The 7 points on her head depict rays of the sun, as if one is standing on the ground and looking up at, quote, her, looking up at the face with the sun directly behind the statue's head. Think about that. How strange. Why would a sculptor of a giant statue put sun rays over the head? And since you can't hover a giant metal sun over her head with a giant piece of rebar, the sun rays in this case end up looking like a crown. Isn't the statue just standing in the sun of the natural day? Isn't that enough? Why is it so important to put the sun in terms of something that ends up looking like a crown to most people with 7 points? Why is that so important to place on the head? The reason is obvious. The sun itself is instrumental to the symbolism of the statue itself. One cannot be without the other. It's not about depicting a sunny day, really. When you do that, the sun has now become instrumental to the meaning behind the statue itself. Okay? Ain't no sunny day. That ain't it. Okay? The quote thinker doesn't have a metal sun or crown on his head depicting the sun. Neither does any other statue except the Colossus at Rhodes, and we'll get to that. The Statue of Liberty bears something 1,000 times more significant than a crown. Sun worship is the theme of the statue itself. The very goal is to connect her and others to the sun. Did you ever hear that in 3rd grade? I didn't think so. Research one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world called the Colossus of Rhodes. In 292 BC, the Colossus of Rhodes was a depiction of the sun god Apollo, or Helios. Do you think it's just a coincidence that the sun god wears the same crown as the Statue of Liberty? Which, going forward, I'm going to abbreviate Statue of Liberty, first initial of each word. I'm going to abbreviate SOL, Sol, which actually means sun in Spanish and other languages. Helios, the Colossus at Rhodes, also holds a torch in a raised arm, but often the torch is not depicted in paintings. Only a raised arm is, because the torch crumbled many years before the body of the statue fell down. The torch was simply not present during the time of some artists' renderings, like this one. But in fact, Helios did raise a lit or illuminated torch in that arm, exactly like Sol does, meaning sun or Statue of Liberty. Where this is going should be pretty clear. If the SOL is in any way meant to mimic or be compared to the Colossus of Rhodes, then SOL or Sol is a pagan sun god in New York Harbor holding up the light of illumination above the masses. This isn't a stretch. This is what it is. People will argue everything in this section I present is false, while at the same time admitting they didn't know any of the facts I just presented. It was supposed to go to the Egypt, Port of Said, stand over the Suez Canal. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But you're starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and she's just Lady Liberty, and she represents freedom. Is anybody listening to that going to really go there? You can't have it both ways. If you didn't know any of the facts just presented, then it's not sane to argue with me using the old fairy tale holding on to, quote, Lady Liberty, the gift from France. Let's now go back to the Statue of Liberty's construction. If the story is what they say it is, why would a private group in France go through unimaginable time, expense, and effort to construct the world's largest statue for the benefit of a group of people halfway around the world they supposedly didn't even like very much? And, by the way, who didn't like them? A private group in France wouldn't have gone through all of that for the reasons we're told they did. They were honoring their own sun god and simply wanted it displayed in an incredibly prominent place. If they couldn't have the Suez Canal, then New York Harbor works just fine. They certainly got their wish. It's now become the most recognized Green Goblin in the entire world. Understanding it was first intended for Egypt throws everything you have ever been told about the Statue of Liberty out the window. All right, let's pause for a moment. Don't even read the text. Just listen, please. Try to be as open-minded as you possibly can, knowing it normally takes years of hard work to put aside all the lies, the false constructs, dogmas, everything society has thrown at us our entire lives, meant to get a citizen thinking and believing a certain thing in a certain way. It takes years, and I'm going to ask you to do it right now, okay? It's also a big risk I'm about to take because somebody that's desperate to hold on to their worldview, to hold on to what they want the world to be, when somebody makes a presentation like this, they will very, very patiently wait for the person making the presentation to either, one, make a mistake that they can latch on to like a Wolverine, or present something that they just can't possibly accept. Either way, they latch onto that one piece and they use it to throw out or discredit the entire presentation. It's like a math teacher in high school saying, if anybody gets any of these problems wrong, even one, your entire paper's wrong. You get an F. This is not fair, but this is what people do to protect their worldview. I just want you to be aware of it, okay? I want you to be aware of it as you roll your eyes in this section. Right, I'm going to do this because it's too important not to, and it's just another fact of the case. This is a fact. People won't accept it, but there's no way around it. Answer me this. Why is the statue's face clearly a man's face? Put aside what you believe to be a dress, which I could say is simply flowing Roman robes worn by the scholars of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Put aside everything you know and just look at the face. It's pretty simple. If you're out to construct a woman, why would you possibly use a gigantic, thick, bridged Roman nose? Why would you do it? This isn't a trick question. They had the entire breadth of how a woman's face could be shaped or look to work with. It's no one in particular, so they could have done anything. When an artist gives a child in a painting class the first or second lesson on how to draw a woman's face, there are certain things that make a woman's face a woman's. The one thing that it never is a gigantically thick, bridged Roman nose with that type of mouth and jaw. Believe what you want. The facts are right in front of you. When examining the face, block out what you believed in the past to be a crown or some lady's item on the head like a tiara. Block out everything but the face. Block out the hair, which I could take, again, the other side and say the hair is neither a man nor a woman's. In fact, if you look at the wigs that colonials like George Washington wore, or European nobility or European judges wore in their heads, the hair of the Statue of Liberty is a closer match with that than what should be the long hair of a woman of the era, or of any era. Women had long hair up until somewhat recently. If it's Lady Liberty, well, where's the long hair? Some curls in the back, which are much closer looking to a judge's white wig. If it's Lady Liberty, where's the long hair? Women of the era didn't wear their hair like that, parted it in the middle like that. Show me one picture. How do you dismiss this? How do you get around this? These are just facts. There's no conspiracy here. Now, if people tend to agree, some people might say, well, okay, it looks like a man's face. I agree. Some people will tend to agree. But they'll come up with every excuse in the world as to why it just must be a woman. And what I'm saying is impossible. How? They'll say they'll pull out excuses from every place possible. They'll say, well, Matt, sculpting the face of a gargantuan metal statue is extremely difficult. And I don't know, everything that size ends up looking like a man's face. Well, however, we see perfect detail in the face of Mount Rushmore. And that's carved in stone. Perfect detail in the face of Mount Rushmore, carved in stone. It's not meant to be Mount Rushmore for men in general or anything that looks like any old man. Lady Liberty gets away with this. The president's faces exactly in the stone look exactly right. Stone's a lot harder to work with than malleable metal. Look at the ancient marble and granite sculptures of, back ancient Greece, Venus de Milo, Aphrodite. Yes, master sculptors going back thousands of years can make a woman's face look like a woman. Newsflash, master sculptors can make a woman's face look like a woman. Don't insult Michelangelo. Unlike, what they had to do in other eras, these people, Bertolli and the ones that constructed on behalf of the Freemasons the Statue of Liberty, they could just make it look like any woman's face. See, even a metal statue or sculpture, you can make it look like whatever you want. And they didn't just tell this guy to make the statue look like a man. He said, well, what man? I can make it look like anything you want. I don't know, any old man. Any man? Just make sure it looks like a man and it couldn't be construed as a woman. Here's a picture of Caitlyn Jenner. Use this. He got it exactly right, this guy. So I can make it look like anything you want. So for the Statue of Liberty, they didn't even have to get it exactly right. It just had to look like a woman. But it ends up looking like a man. But I'm crazy. I'm a conspiracy theorist. And it's easier to believe just what the textbooks say. Just throw out everything I present in this presentation. Just is too much of an impact on the worldview, I guess. And back to the hair. Still woman's hairstyle. Lady Liberty would have long hair. It looks much more like a wig or white wig that nobility or judges would wear. The only girl or female of any kind I've seen hair that even resembles that is Shirley Temple. And when was the style where this thick hair is parted right down the middle? Come on, guys. At some point, you just gotta see the world for what it really is here. All right. Now, after all this, if you choose to believe I have my facts right about what she's not, many believe, based on good evidence, that it is supposed to be the sun god himself, Apollo, just as he appears as Helios in Rhodes. Helios, Apollo, basically the same thing. If not a man, many smart people claim she's a tribute to Isis, a goddess of Egypt. There are other interpretations. The Statue of Liberty is representing Lucifer to many smart people, who was known as the light bearer. We'll talk about that aspect in the Emma Lazarus poem coming up. And you can think all this is nuts if you want to, but every single one of these theories of what she may be holds magnitudes of weight over the BS that people on the street believe it is, and this notion of Lady Liberty. Yeah, you read that right. Somebody debating the Statue of Liberty as a representation or a light bearer for Lucifer would have much more evidence and clean the clock of anybody on the other side spewing forth from their podium, taking the position that she was a gift from France and represents liberty. I just proved that's all bull crap. Did you forget she was supposed to go to Egypt? That throws everything out. So, see, this is where the Wolverines protecting their worldview will latch on to something they consider to be a mistake. Oh, well, I totally disagree, Matt, that your interpretation that this is Apollo or Helios or it does. You know what? I'm going to point out to you, it doesn't matter. I don't know exactly what it is. The point of these presentations is to point out that people know nothing. Not for me to get it exactly right and to take you to the last page of the story's end and show you everything exactly as it should be. This stuff is all carried through what's called a cult or hidden. I'm just out to tell you it's not what the damn textbook told you. I don't know exactly. I have an idea. I know the sun worship carries through it and there's some things that are undeniable, but I don't know exactly in the creepy back room what they meant it to be. Okay, now I promise no conspiracy. That's a little bit, but is it conspiracy, or is that just the facts of this case? Some people will still not be convinced, so I have even more evidence to make my case. Of course, everybody's heard at least parts of the famous poem written by Emma Lazarus, transcribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your tired, your poor, huddled masses yearning to come into the United States to become registered Democrats. You've heard that line? Everybody has? Do you know what the name of that poem is? The Emma Lazarus poem transcribed at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty? Most people don't know what it's called. It's called The New Colossus. Yeah, remember the Colossus of Rhodes? The poem's called The New Colossus. Yeah, I know the first line of the poem appears to separate our jolly green giant goblin from the Colossus of Rhodes. It appears to try to separate it. That just put a line in, so it's not like the brazen giant of Greek fame. No, not like it at all. Sorry, in my opinion, that statement actually links them together by putting the image of Apollo into the reader's mind at the very first line of the poem. Imagery is a very powerful thing. It says not like, but then talks about the Colossus of Rhodes, puts that image into the reader's mind immediately and links it to the Statue of Liberty. Let's see how not alike they are. Let's just do a little Emma Lazarus test here. 1. Both have the crown or sun rays on the head depicted or constructed in the exact same way to represent the sun. 2. Both have a right arm raised holding the torch of illumination. 3. Both stand over a harbor, a body of water, which is significant. You can't stray into it here. Let's continue. 4. Both hold a special object cradled in the other hand. 5. Both are dressed in, quote, ancient Greek or Roman style garb or robes. 6. Both are men. Hey, Emma, just like you said in the poem, sure, just put it in the first line. They're not alike at all, the Colossus of Rhodes and the Statue of Liberty. The sculptor, Bartoli, couldn't have linked them any closer without calling that thing in New York Harbor the Colossus of Rhodes Part Douche. Is it Hot Shots Part Deux? How do you pronounce Deux? But it's pretty simple what they did. I mean, it's really first grade psychology. If you don't want 300 million people to know your country is in love with the sun god, then you get the first line of a poem to say, it's not like the sun god. That's all you got to do. Then you can turn to that line if anybody like me starts putting two and two together. For example, Mussolini, right before World War II, he could have hired Emma Lazarus, brought her back to life, and said, construct a poem where the first line says, unlike that dictator in Berlin, see, we're not alike at all. It says it right here in the poem. But what it does again is it links them together. The imagination of the person reading, immediately the image of the sun god, Apollo, Helios. That's powerful. It's powerful in a occult way people don't understand. Right? All of this is the final nail that the SOL, the Statue of Liberty, which means sun, is simply a more recent manifestation of the Colossus of Rhodes, the Greek god Apollo, the sun god, or Helios. And if I didn't get that right, you believe it's something else, that's fine. The point of the presentation was to show you that everything you've been taught and told in school and what the man or the woman on the street would say is entirely wrong. Now, I want you to ask yourself, how is that possible? We're not talking about some obscure thing. What do you know about Pickett's charge, of the Confederate Pickett's charge during the Civil War? I don't know. I didn't study the Civil War. And I don't mean to downplay, thousands died during Pickett's charge. I'm just saying something that we wouldn't expect everybody on the street to know. My first presentation was about Christmas. This is the Statue of Liberty. It's not like you're going to tap somebody and say, what? What's that? I never heard it. There's a statue in New York Harbor. These are the pillars of American life. Yet nobody knows anything about them. How is that possible? What does that say about your reality itself? It's time to start thinking differently. Maybe stop calling the brother-in-law at the Thanksgiving Day table conspiracy theorist. He might actually know something. Thanks for listening.